on mic, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are more seats at the front if anybody doesn't have. Okay, Ian's just going to give us some housekeeping tips.
Good morning, welcome everyone. Just a few very brief housekeeping rules. There are no planned fire drills. If the fire alarm does happen to sound, please stay calm, stay in your seats and wait further instructions. For anyone who needs toilets, there are toilets, gents and ladies through there. There's also ground floor disabled access toilets at the back.
Good evening. For those that don't know me, my name is Michelle Siffert. I manage the Hilton Children and Family Centre in Salford. A little over 2.5 weeks ago, under the incredible guidance and leadership of Dr. Sandy Mann, a few very passionate community projects made a decision. Enough was enough. It was time we acted as one community to deal with all the serious issues and challenges that we are currently facing, some of them unprecedented. And whilst we're using the time now, as there is a heightened awareness across the community as a whole, due to recent events, tonight's evening is one long overdue and not related directly to any specific case or situation in Arkahilla. Mental health and all the complicated causes and issues around that topic does not differentiate by the type of capital or kippah that you wear or if you keep kosher or not. It can and does affect anyone at any time. Yesterday, one of our incredible committee wrote a message on our ever-growing, extremely long Action for Mental Health WhatsApp group. She told us that she'd met someone in the street who said they weren't coming tonight because they didn't fancy any of the speakers. Her reply was, "We're not asking you to marry them." And though that sounds really funny, that's key to what our message is. We know that we have a massive amount of further work to do. However, we may have to organise events to suit the specific cultural needs of each group and whatever they feel is their particular issues and in whatever way they feel comfortable. However, we're not asking you to marry them, to marry each other. Just work together and listen to our messages, as our incredible committee has done. Who would have thought putting names together like Herschel Wise and UGIA, B'nai Akiva and everybody else would be on the paper together? On a personal note, people kept asking me, why are there so many logos? Believe me, we could have had at least another 100. Once we all put our names on, everyone wanted to join. For the Herschel Wise Children and Family Centre, it was simple. If one extra person came tonight because Herschel Wise or UGA or Camp Simcha or Friendship Circle or B'nai Akiva, etc. was on that poster and they needed to hear our message, we have truly made a difference. I'm proud to be flying the flag of our United Action for Mental Health Committee, and indeed our united community. This is just the beginning. It's now a very difficult task for me to introduce Dr. Sandy Mann, who has really been the power behind everything that's here tonight. She has led us and inspired us to start the work that we're doing. This should only help the community in the future. Thank you.
Up to a quarter of young people struggle with mental health issues, such as anxiety, stress and depression every year. Some have called this an epidemic, and certainly, if these were physical ailments, we would not hesitate to call it so. But mental health is more easily hidden, and certainly more easily ignored. Worse than that, it's often looked on as a sign of weakness. And when we use the term snowflake generation to suggest that younger people have less resilience than older generations, we add to the stigma. The idea that young people, or indeed adults, should toughen up or pull themselves together does not help and adds to the unnecessary stigma. Tonight is about breaking down the stigma of mental health in our community. about helping us all cope better and manage better with young people and older people in our community with mental health issues. The time for brushing these issues under the carpet is long gone, and tonight's event, whilst put together in such a short time, is long overdue. Putting on a genuinely cross-community event like this in 2 weeks has not been without its challenges. And everyone in the community has a view on what this evening should be. I realised from the start that meeting everyone's needs and expectations tonight was not going to be feasible. The reality is that we have less than 2 hours to try to impart everything we need to know about mental health, and clearly that's an impossible task. So to manage expectations, let me make it clear from the outset that this evening is not going to provide a foolproof guide to mental health. It can't. This evening is a start, and our brief is to provide the essentials, the most important, the most urgent that we think the community needs right now. I know it won't be enough. I know some of you will leave saying you wanted more on maybe bullying, maybe drugs, maybe social media, whatever. But we can't possibly cover everything in the time available. This event is just the start. We, together with a wide range of fantastic organisations already providing mental health support and initiatives, will be putting on other events, but these take time to plan. I'll share some of these with you at the end, but tonight is about trying to give you as much of what we think you need in the meantime that we possibly can. In an average class of 30 young people, 3 or 4 will have a mental health problem. Tonight is about giving you some tools from our 6 mental health practitioners to recognise these problems and to help manage them. The process for this evening is to follow a logical progression through the course of an acute mental health condition. No individual cases will be mentioned. We're going to be starting with Dr. Paul Abelis, who will be looking at some of the signs and symptoms of common problems that might affect the emotional well-being of young people. I will then be taking the floor to examine the signs and symptoms that someone, adult or young person, might be at suicide risk. Then Deborah Fraser will guide us through the rather confusing maze of what to do next, once you've identified someone as being at risk. And Daniel Nissen will talk about how to manage and cope once the person is in the system. Dr. James Black will then look at recovery and living with mental health conditions, and show us it is possible to live happy and fulfilled lives even with mental health conditions. Finally, Dolph Ben-Jakob-Kurtzman will be showing us how to cope with a traumatic event such as has been experienced recently in our community, using some practical exercises. There's a lot of information to take in, and this evening is not going to be light entertainment. I make no apologies for that. We're not here to be entertained, but informed and educated. There'll be a question and answer session at the end, but all questions must be submitted in writing. I know that this will be frustrating for some, but it is essential that we manage what could be a sensitive and emotional process. On your seats you will find paper and pen, hopefully, so if you have a question at any point, write it down, raise your hand, and one of our wonderful team with the badges will come and collect it from you. We also want to know what you want and need us and the entire community to provide going forward. Please write your thoughts and ideas on the other sheets, and we'll collect those too at the end. We'll leave them on your seats when you go out. We do realise that the content of tonight might be distressing for some. If anyone does feel that they want to talk to someone during the evening, please make yourself known to our team, and we can find you a quiet space for someone to support you. At the end of the evening, the information stands outside will remain open for at least half an hour, and refreshments will be available in the reception area. And there are some extra seats here. If we can liberate some seats for those who are standing at the back, we'll do our best during the evening. And now I want to introduce our first session. Dr. Paul Abelis is a consultant clinical psychologist based at Royal Manchester Children's Hospital and has research experience covering diverse areas of child and adolescent psychology, including anxiety and depression. He's going to talk about the pressures that are faced by young people today and how we can promote positive mental health.
Shavuot good evening. Goodbye. Bonsoir. I'm first going to outline some of the most common problems, challenges and stressors faced by youth today, and then provide some approaches and principles that are known to encourage healthy emotional well-being. In thinking about the stressors faced by young people, it's worth noting that in fact, children learn how to respond to stress as they grow up. In small amounts, stress can be good, but excessive stress can affect the way a child thinks, behaves, and feels. So what are some of the stressors? Young people feel lots of pressure from peers, parents, and society to conform to conflicting expectations. For example, worrying about schoolwork, problems with friends, peer group pressures, or online and offline bullying. Children and young people often lack good mentors and role models. They experience stress and difficulty prioritizing and managing their time, for example, juggling responsibilities such as schoolwork and leisure. They're also exposed to on-screen violence and unhealthy social media. Adolescents, in particular, can have negative thoughts about themselves, whether that's about going through difficult bodily changes or questions about their identity and self-worth. Some young people will experience their parents going through a divorce or separation or domestic violence or discord at home. Others have to deal with changing schools, moving house, or dealing with housing or money problems in the family. Finally, they may be exposed in various ways to risk-taking behaviours such as substance misuse and gambling. With those challenges held in our minds, let's pause for a moment to consider the important concept of resilience. As building resilience is in fact the key to strengthening children's mental health. Just as physically healthy people are better able to bounce back from illness or injury, young people with strong mental health are better able to bounce back from adversity and stress. This ability is called resilience. Young people who are emotionally and mentally resilient then have the tools for coping with difficult situations and maintaining a positive outlook. They remain focused, flexible, and productive in bad times as well as good. Their resilience also makes them less afraid of new experiences or uncertain futures. Just as it requires effort to build and maintain physical health, so it is with mental health. Unfortunately, we do have to work harder these days to ensure strong mental health in our children, simply because, as I've described, there are so many ways that life can take a toll on their emotional well-being. So how do we ensure our children are properly equipped for the world? How do we make them more resilient? Here are 13 broad ways to do it. Firstly, give children unconditional love. Acceptance, security, and love should be at the heart of every family. Children need to know that your love does not depend on their achievements. Their mistakes should be expected and accepted. I'll talk about discipline soon, but the confidence of a child grows in a home that is full of unconditional love and affection. I want to share with you something I heard recently. Instead of being obsessed with test results, when your child or teenager comes home from school, or we come home from work, we need to close our technology, put away our phones, and look them in the eye, and let them see the joy that fills our faces, seeing our child for the first time in a few hours. And then we have to say, how was your day? What did you like about today? And when your child says lunch, and you want to hear about that English test, not lunch, you have to take an interest in lunch. You have to say, what was great about lunch? Children and young people need to know that they matter as humans, not because of their grades or achievements. So we also need to know how to listen. Listen to your child without being critical or trying to solve the problem right away. Instead, work with your child to help them understand and solve what is upsetting them. The key for them is to have an experience of you as a good listener, someone they can regularly talk to in person, who will listen to them, not having any preconceptions of how they should think or feel. As a good listener, you will listen to the feelings behind their words and not interrupt, judge, or criticize them. Be a role model. Your child looks to you as a model for healthy behavior. Do your best to keep your own stress under control and manage it in healthy ways. Encourage empathy in your kids. As we know, saying you should care about X because is not going to leave a lasting impression on them. Much more powerful will be the example your kids see you set and the extent to which you demonstrate what it means to listen to others, to consider others' perspectives and opinions, and to care about them. That kind of modelling, particularly how you show compassion for your child when they're having a hard time, will help them to build their capacity for empathy. And when children watch adults around them make an effort to live a life full of concern for people around them, having awareness of others' needs, they will assume that that's just how things are done, and empathy will become more of their default approach to the world. Now, giving kids things to do around the house is also important. The longest longitudinal study of humans ever conducted was carried out at the research at Harvard University. They found that professional success in life comes from doing chores in childhood. And the earlier you start, the better. So that roll up your sleeves and muck in mindset, a mindset that says, I will contribute my effort to the betterment of the whole, that's what gets you ahead in the world. Oh, and you get some of your housework done too. It's a win-win. Praise. Encouraging your young child's first steps or their ability to learn a new game helps them to develop a desire to explore and learn about their surroundings. Assure your kids by smiling and talking to them. Your attention helps build their self-esteem and confidence. Be honest. Do not hide your failures from your children. It is important for them to know that we all make mistakes. It can be very reassuring to know that an adult is not perfect. Provide a safe, secure, and dependable home. Regular family routines are comforting for young people. Having family dinner together, doing family activities, all potentially help relieve stress. It's important to highlight that even a safe, dependable home has a child who may feel afraid sometimes. Everyone is afraid of something at some point in their life. Fear and anxiety in children often grow out of experiences that they do not understand. If your children have fears that will not go away and affect their behavior, the first step is to find out what is frightening them. Be loving, patient, and reassuring, and not dismissive. Remember, the fear may be very real to them. Use your listening skills. Encourage children to play. To children, play is just fun, but playtime is as important to their development in many ways as food or good care. Playtime helps children be creative, learn problem-solving skills, and learn self-control. It's also important for children to have time with their peers. By being with others, children discover their strengths and weaknesses, develop a sense of belonging, learn how to get along with others, and of course, develop their empathy skills. Provide boundaries. Children need the opportunity to explore and develop new skills and independence, but at the same time, children need to learn that certain behaviors are unacceptable and they are responsible for the consequences of their actions. As members of a family, children need to learn the rules of the family unit, offer guidance and discipline that is fair and consistent, be firm but kind and realistic with your expectations. Remember, the goal is not to control your child, but for them to learn self-control. Avoid nagging, empty threats, and bribery. Rewards can be effective though. Providing a reward once a behavioural target is reached is not the same as a bribe, where the prize is given before the reward. Give children the reasons why you are disciplining them, recognising that that still might be hard for them. Physical activity. As the mind and the body are intrinsically linked, when young people improve their mental health, their physical health, they'll automatically experience greater mental health and emotional well-being. Physical activity also releases endorphins, powerful chemicals that lift the mood and provide added energy. Regular exercise or activity can have a major impact on mental and emotional health. It can relieve stress, improve memory, and help them sleep better. Find things your kids can do that can help them to find meaning and purpose in their life. Everyone derives meaning and purpose from life in different ways. You may think of it as a way that they can feel needed or feel good about themselves, a purpose that drives them on, or simply a reason to get out of bed in the morning. In biological terms, Finding meaning and purpose for our children is essential to their brain health, as it can generate new cells and create new neural pathways in the brain. There are lots of things that they could do. For example, drawing, writing, playing an instrument, building something, spending quality time, giving of themselves to other people who matter to them, or even caring for a pet, or volunteering, or taking care of others, etc. Finally, ensure your child gets into a healthy sleep cycle. It matters more than you think. According to the Millipond Children's Sleep Clinic, the amount of sleep a child needs depends on their age. Skipping a few hours here and there can take a toll on mood, energy, mental sharpness, and ability to handle stress. And over the long term, chronic sleep loss can wreak havoc on health and well-being. One of the most hopeful messages that I'm going to leave you with tonight is that actually the skills that we want to help our kids develop are built during our normal interactions with them. The most important work is done not when we have serious, meaningful conversations with kids, but just as often when we simply play with them, read to them, argue with them, joke with them, or spend time together. Prevention is always better than the cure. Go on, grab those opportunities to build your child's resilience today, and you'll be looking after their mental health tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have got almost a long row of seats here that we reserved and here, so please at the back, come and sit down. Don't stand all evening. There are some seats here. Come and sit down. We're going to make it. And there's some on the separate side as well. Also, I've been asked to remind you that if you do want to ask questions throughout this session, throughout the evening, write them down, put your hand up, and one of our lovely colleagues will come and collect them for, and we'll read them out. We've got more paper if you have lots of questions. There are seats here at the front.
I don't think you can up the exam.
Yeah, sit down. Okay, so now that Dr. Abraham has explained the pressures faced by young people and what we can do to help them, I'm going to be talking about what we can do when all of this gets too much. And I'm going to talk about low mood, suicide risk, and self-harm. For those of you who don't know, I'm Dr. Sandy Mann. I'm a chartered academic psychologist, specialising in emotional well-being, reading from the programme. University senior lecturer in applied clinical psychology, CBT and EMDR private practitioner. Okay. So, everyone has spells of feeling down, but depression is more than just spending a few days feeling sad or unhappy. Depression can make you feel persistently sad and down for weeks or months at a time. Depression affects around 1 in 10 people over the course of their lives. It impacts people of all genders and ages, including children. One recent study suggested that almost a quarter of girls aged 14 showed symptoms of depression, but boys are affected too. So what might these symptoms be? Not experiencing this. Symptoms can be psychological, to do with what's going on in the mind, physical, about how those symptoms are affecting the body, and or social, which is to do with how people behave or act around others. So psychological symptoms of depression include continuous low mood or sadness. So we're not talking about brief episodes. Feeling hopeless and helpless, having low self-esteem, feeling tearful, guilt-ridden, being irritable and intolerant of others, having no motivation or interest in things, finding it difficult to make decisions, not getting any enjoyment out of life anymore, feeling anxious or worried, possibly even having suicidal thoughts or thoughts of harming yourself, which I'll come on to shortly, and expressing or feeling a sense of failure, uselessness, or having a loss of hope. Physical symptoms then of depression can include changes in weight or appetite, problems sleeping, lack of energy, unexplained aches and pains, whereas social symptoms of depression can include avoiding contact with friends, taking part in fewer social activities, neglecting hobbies or interests, and having difficulties in home life or family life. Mental health practitioners describe depression by how serious it is. So we talk of mild depression, which has some impact on your daily life. So generally you're able to go about most of your daily activities, but there may be occasions when you find that difficult. Moderate depression, it has a much more significant impact on your daily life. You start missing more things. For young people, they may miss school, they may miss social events, they may not be doing as much, they're not functioning as well. Whereas severe depression makes it almost impossible to get through daily life. And of course, one very worrying symptom of depression can be self-harm. Self-harm can be part of a wish to end life, but most people who self-harm do not go on to take their life. The intention is often to punish themselves. Sometimes it's to express their great distress or to relieve unbearable tension. And sometimes it's a mixture of all three of those reasons. Self-harm can also be a cry for help, but it shouldn't be confused with attention-seeking. And boys as well as girls self-harm. Startlingly, 10% of young people self-harm, and many start by age 12. This means that even in primary school, we have to be alert to signs and symptoms that somebody may be self-harming. And in secondary school, the chances are there's at least 2 young people in every classroom who have self-harmed at some time. Self-harm usually starts as a way to relieve the build-up of pressure from distressing thoughts and feelings. This might give temporary relief from the emotional pain that the person is feeling. But it's important to know that this relief is only temporary, because the underlying reasons still remain. Soon after, feelings of guilt and shame may follow, which can continue the cycle. But because you get that temporary relief at the start, self-harm can become someone's normal way of dealing with life's difficulties. So there are some signs of self-harm, but often these can be hidden. Unexplained cuts, bruises and marks. Also, some people, if they do have those, are likely to cover up all the time, even in hot weather. And this sign, of course, can make it harder to detect from girls in our community who are likely to cover up in hot weather anyway. So that's something to be aware of. Of course, the most severe form of self-harm is suicide. And this is the one, of course, that we all fear, and probably the reason why most of you are here tonight. Suicide is complex. It's a process that usually occurs gradually, progressing from suicidal thoughts to planning to attempting suicide, and finally, in rare cases, to dying by suicide. It's important to note that while suicidal thoughts are common amongst young people, the vast majority do not go on to take their lives. According to Young Minds, nearly 25% of young people feel suicidal at least once in their lives. So whilst we must always take seriously any such thoughts, I hope to offer some reassurance that the vast majority do not go on to attempt to take their life. Of course, no one wants to take that risk, so any signs and symptoms of suicidal thoughts must be taken seriously. So what are those signs and symptoms? Obviously, some of these are here on the boards there. There's hopelessness. Sometimes people will act recklessly or engage in risky activities, not bothered about their safety or well-being. People can feel trapped, that there's no end in sight to their problems. Some may increase or start using alcohol or drugs. They may withdraw from family, friends or society. They may have difficulty sleeping or sleep at unusual times. There may be dramatic changes of mood. The most important sign is when people feel they have no sense of purpose for living, or no reason to carry on. Many of these symptoms, of course, are similar to severe depression, but there's a certain belief system that researchers have identified that can give a really strong indication that someone may be at risk. This is a 3-part belief system, And it involves a person having a negative view of themselves, their world, and their future. So this means that the person thinks very badly of themselves. Nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, I'm worthless, I'm rubbish, I'm no use to anyone. People would be better off without me. They have a negative view of the world. The world is a bad place. Nobody cares about me, nobody can help me. The world is terrible. And combined with this is this negative view of the future. There is no hope for anything to change. I will always be like this. Nothing is going to change. Those three indicators, together with having nothing to look forward to or enjoy, getting no more pleasure out of life, should always ring alarm bells that somebody may be at risk. When I'm assessing suicide risk, either with clients in my clinic or even with students at my university who have expressed some thoughts of suicide in me, I always ask the following questions. Do you have a suicide plan? How would you do it? Have you thought about it? Have you thought about the best way, the most painless way? Have you looked up methods on the internet? So I'm assessing whether they have a plan there. Do you have what you need to carry out your plan if they say they do have a plan? Do you have the means to carry out that plan? If there's a yes there, do you know when you would do it? Have you got a time frame? If there's a yes there, the final question, do you intend to take your own life? So we can classify people according to risk, according to those answers that they give. A lot of people will have vague thoughts of suicide. As I said, around 25% of young people and some adults indeed will have some vague thoughts of life not being worth living, or what they might call dark thoughts. They may have some vague plan, but obviously the more formulated the plan, the more at risk they are. It is very hard to ask such questions of our own children, which is why we should always get other professionals involved if we're worried at all. So it's often very difficult to do this suicide risk plan yourself, this assessment yourself. But I'm hoping to perhaps reassure some of you that just expressing suicidal thoughts does not mean that the young person is going to take their own life or attempt to. I must also point out that, and this is very important, that many people who do go on to take their lives or attempt to, do tell someone first of their plans. For young people, this may be their friends or somebody that they know, and we have to impress upon young people the importance of telling an appropriate person anytime anyone they know expresses any suicidal thoughts. You must send a strong message to young people via schools, via communities, via youth movements, that if they hear it, they tell it. And this is for their own protection as well as for the person at risk. Okay, so once you have identified someone as being at risk of poor mental health, or depression, or even suicide, what do you do next? Deborah Fraser is a psychological wellbeing practitioner for the primary care mental health team in NHS Salford, and she is now going to try and guide us through the pathway.
There are a number of seats over here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, about 12 seats. Please come forward. There are seats dotted around. There are at least 10, 12 seats over here.
Please do come forward and occupy some of these seats at the end. Please also remember that if you do have a question, people are going around shortly with bags, so just watch out for them. And if you wish to fold your question or just place it directly in the bag, please do so. So, if you notice signs of distress in a person, what should you do next? The main question that we need to be asking ourselves is the distressed person safe today? And the reason for that is that there are certain services which will be asking that particular question when they arrive at NHS services? If the answer is yes, the person is safe today, then we're looking at the next stage, which will be referral into services. We can self-refer into most psychological services, and that is irrespective of where you live for adults, but for children, you do need to be going through your GP for referral to the for the Community Mental Health Trust or for the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. So if you are safe, or if the person who is in distress is safe, the route is either via the self-referral or through the GP. GPs are the gateway to services. They always should be our first point of call. However, if you feel that the distressed person is not safe today, where do we go from here? The answer is very, very simple. It's 999. If that person is not safe today, the best people to deal with that situation are the mental health professionals. And 999 will get you there at the earliest opportunity. But you can also take or go to the NHS hospitals nearby to go to the A&E services for assessment, for a mental health assessment. In every emergency department, in North Manchester, in Fairfield, in Bury, there are professionals there who are specifically trained for assessing people to know whether or not that person is safe. It will also ensure that they get into services. If you're not sure if the person is safe, then don't be afraid to ask. Often, people have disclosed to you some of the signs and symptoms that we've heard about just now. And people don't know how to ask this question. And certainly when I first started doing the job that I'm doing now, that was one of the most difficult things that I had to learn how to do. But when people have expressed maybe some level of hopelessness, it can be an easy way of opening that conversation by saying, often people who say things like you have just said to me have a plan to actually end their life or hurt themselves in some way. Do you have a plan like that? Or is it that you just want things to be different? And there's a major difference between the two. Because if somebody wants something to be different, you can then talk about a future without whatever it is that's distressing them. And that is how you can engender hopefulness for that person. But getting back to my remit, which was what happens when a person is going to be referred into services, if we can just see that if your GP has a press switch address, then you can complete the self-referral form on the internet or see your GP. If your GP has a Salford address, you can call our service, which is 6 Degrees Social Enterprise. And that number is there on the slide, and ask for a referral into the Jewish Community Project. And you can have a Jewish worker or a non-Jewish worker, whichever you prefer. If, on the other hand, you are already in services with the NHS, then you will probably have a safety plan, you or the person for whom you are caring. So what does that safety plan say? Who's the key worker and who's the duty officer? There's also a service for Salford residents at Ramsgate House, which is very close on Berry New Road, where you can just walk in at any time. The services are out there. Please feel free to use them because they are free. Thank you.
So we've looked at assessing risk and what to do about it. But once a young person, or indeed anybody, is in the system or has accessed help, we still have the issue of long-term management of that person. We still need to know what to say to them, how to talk to them, and how to keep them safe. To address this, I'd like to introduce Daniel Nisson, who is an NHS counsellor and outreach worker for the excellent local Jewish organisation Shona, which offers mental health support and which has information available outside.
Okay, so if we've already recognised or assessed that someone is going through a crisis or is generally suffering from mental health difficulties, I want to share with you just a few pointers to make sure that we're dealing with them on a personal level in the best possible way. So the first thing for us to remember is that it's really important when dealing with people with mental health difficulties that we remain calm. If someone opens up to you, especially a loved one, for example, that they're suffering in some way, remain calm. They sometimes can be anxious or angry, which can make interacting with them difficult. But it's important to remain calm. That's because people who are suffering from mental health difficulties are highly sensitive to the mental states of other people. So, for example, if someone opens up to you about their difficulties, and you get really emotional about that, you could cause them to close down, not be able to talk about it. If someone mentions thoughts or feelings of self-harm, let them know in a calm voice that you've heard them and that you'll deal with it together. It's okay to tell people that you don't know the answers and that you'll be seeking advice. The next thing is that it's really important to listen to them. And you might say, well, okay, that's obvious. But what I'm talking about here is going out of a way to provide a platform, to give them space and time to be able to talk about how they're feeling. Because when we listen to someone empathically, we send the message that we think that they're important. It can be lonely and sometimes even scary when one has mental health difficulties. So one way you can help them is by reassuring them that you're going to be there for them as much as possible. So don't promise more than you can give. And don't tell them unrealistic expectations, such as someone who just got a recent diagnosis of psychosis, telling them that, well, everything's going to be back to normal soon. And another point about this is really important, is don't reassure the person or tell them or promise them that you're going to keep it completely quiet when you might have to tell appropriate people. So they might tell you, please don't tell anyone, please don't tell anyone. And you can respond with something along the lines of, I'm not going to tell anyone who doesn't need to know. Be patient with people suffering from mental health difficulties. If someone opens up to you that they're suffering, you might be curious, you might want to know more details about what happened to them, about how their thoughts and feelings are. But it's important for them to set the pace about talking about it, not to overburden them with questions. Like we said, they might be anxious or angry, which can make interacting with them difficult, but try and be patient and remember there's something else going on for them underneath. Forcing people to get help is generally not the best course of action. So, for example, if you've identified that someone actually needs therapy, we can help them, we can encourage them, we can handhold them, take them to appointments, and try and get them to get it, but we can't force them. If we force them to get help and they're not ready, we run the risk of it either not working or backfiring in some way. While your perspective might be useful to share with a person, don't make too many assumptions that you know what's going on and especially that you know what caused them to feel this way, or what might help. So know, oh, I know exactly how you feel, or you just need to get a bit of exercise and get out a bit more, and then you'll be fine. Try and keep an open mind. Like we said, it's some lonely and sometimes isolating when one has mental health difficulties. So another area you can try and help them is try and keep social contact with the person. Especially when it comes to someone who's, let's say not a family member, someone who's maybe living by himself. Try and take the stigma away from it and invite them for Shabbos meal, invite them to social events, and try and keep them connected to relationships and the community. And the last thing I want to mention is about support, and that's in two ways. One is that, okay, so we've assessed or again recognized that someone needs some help, and let's say they're even going and getting that professional help that they need, but that's not always a straightforward process. Sometimes it can take time when they're in the system. We all know what NHS waiting lists can be like. So we have to sometimes think out of the box when trying to give them support and help them in that way. There are support groups for people suffering. There are private therapists, befriending services that can help take and bridge that gap for them. And the last thing, and perhaps this relates back to what we started with, we're thinking about keeping calm, and that's if you're looking after someone suffering from mental health difficulties, it can take its toll on you. So it's really important that you look after yourself. I always say that there's a reason when in a plane, when the oxygen mask falls down, they tell parents, put on the mask before putting on your children. Because sometimes, to look after other people, you have to first take care of yourself. So it's really important that you look after yourself. You're really important. And so, as such, there are befriending services, there's support groups specifically for carers, there are community well-being programs such as mindfulness and the like, trying to think out the box, getting your family, your friends and family involved, your Rav. There's no way to try and help take that burden off there for you. Because we've got to remember that the best thing you can give to people suffering from mental health difficulties are healthy and stable relationships. Thank you.
Thank you. Our fifth session tonight offers a slightly more upbeat message because we don't want this evening to be all full of doom and gloom. There is hope and positivity when it comes to mental health, and people can and do recover. Being diagnosed with a mental health condition does not have to be the end of the world, and people can go on to live happy and fulfilled lives. Here to tell us more is Dr. James Glass, psychiatrist from Merseycare NHS Foundation Trust. Dr. Glass has also worked as a volunteer for the Samaritans and Childline, and is a current befriender for the Shaman.
Hi everyone, I'm James Glass, I'm a psychiatrist working in Merseyside. So we're going to talk about how effective mental health interventions actually are. So I know there's a lot of confusion and controversy surrounding mental health interventions, or mental health in general, and especially mental health interventions. People are often unsure if medications or talking techniques work. So I'm going to go through the outcomes of some of the common mental health problems that people face. And all the data that I'm going to use is from either the British Journal of Psychiatry or the Lancet, which are two of the most respected journals in mental health in the UK. So let's start off with depression, which is probably the most common mental health disorder. So research has shown that antidepressants are moderately effective with severe depressive episodes. So what does that mean for the actual person? So what that means is that they are twice as likely to recover from the illness than without the medication. That doesn't just mean improvement, that means they are no longer depressed. It also halves the risk of having a second episode of depression in the next 5 years. If you combine the tablets with talking therapies, the outcomes are even better. So we move on to bipolar disorder, which is another relatively common and can be a severe mental health problem. In the acute illness, the medications give you moderate improvements. In real terms, you get an increase from 30% to 50% of people improving significantly. And the risk of a second episode is reduced by up to half in the next 3 to 6 years. Take a look at schizophrenia, another relatively common and often very severe mental health problem. In the acute illness, the medication will double your chances of getting a significant reduction in your symptoms. And the medication is more than half the risk of getting another episode within a year. And I haven't just cherry-picked the data. So if you look at other mental health problems such as anxiety disorders, OCD or ADHD, you get similar numbers. And medication is just one of many interventions that we have at our disposal. As mentioned earlier, we can provide talking therapies. We can also provide other things such as supportive counselling, psychoeducation for family, friends, teachers or employers. We can provide day centres for social support, carers and respite services for family members, helps with debts and finances. The list goes on, and it all helps to improve a young person or adult's mental health. And while I accept there is still a stigma associated with getting a label of a mental health problem, it's important to remember that 1 in 4 people will get a mental health diagnosis at some point in their lifetime. And if you don't just leave it and actually get the right support, your chances of recovery are much higher.
Okay, our final, just a reminder that if you have any questions for any of our panel tonight, we do have our lovely assistants like Rabbi Simon here holding the fed bags, Daniel at the back, Jacqueline over there, Kate over there. They'll come and collect your questions for the question and answer session, and they'll be coming up shortly. Our final mental health session this evening is more of a workshop aimed at helping us cope after a traumatic event. The past few weeks have been very hard for many, as was the period following the Manchester Arena bomb almost 2 years ago. Rabbi Dov Ben-Yaakov Kurtzman was instrumental in bringing his unique trauma intervention program to Manchester following the Arena bomb, and he will now share some of his strategies with you. I just want to remind people, if anyone does need any support at this particular moment, because obviously some of the content is distressing, we do have people available to talk to, and we have private rooms to take you to. So just go to the back if you do need any support.
Okay. 30 seconds to notice your thoughts when I say these words. Suicide, trauma, young people. Okay, hands up if anyone has their thoughts. Okay, keep your hands up if those thoughts were distressing or worrying. Okay, so you just like the first lesson. The first lesson on how to deal with difficult thoughts. And that is, first of all, to notice them. Not to run away from them, or to fight them, or to distract yourself from them. It's very non-intuitive to try to run away. The first lesson is, first of all, to notice them, and to notice that they are distressing, and that they might even cause some sort of anxiety. Now, my name is Dov. Good morning. There might be a possibility that I'll have a few minutes extra than anyone else, and the reason for that is I was told to speak very slow because of my heavy Israeli accent. It's a very special dialect of Israeli accent. So yeah, I was trained as a clinical social worker in Israel, from psychosis right all the way to addictive behaviors and everything else in between. And one of the things that I particularly liked working with was young people. I came to Manchester 2 years ago, and within 2 weeks, I was on the streets of Salford and Prestwich working with our children, our young people. And they told me and showed me what their type of behavior was. And a lot of it has addictive and drug-orientated behavior. But they have a voice, and they want to talk about it, and they want to get help for it. And sometimes they feel that there's no one listening. This week, I met with a wide range of young people of our community. And when I say a wide range, I mean there were Haredi boys and girls, Hasidic boys and girls, modern Orthodox boys and girls that are not affiliated. They were from schools like Benos, Jewish Day, Yavne, King David, Manchester High, what's it called? Yeah, not very Whitehall, Berry College. And we sat together and we discussed, and I listened to them and I wanted to know what they wanted to say. And they have a message for you tonight. But before I give you their message, I was sitting at Shabbos lunch today, and a young girl called Pearl Jacobson mentioned to me a little varta about today's parashah. And she mentioned that Moshe Rabbeinu was not mentioned in the parashah. And he was not mentioned in the parashah because at one point in the past he'd said to God, I want you to strike my name from the Torah. And I want you to strike my name from the Torah because unless you forgive the children of Israel. And that was all done and dusted, and God forgave the children of Israel, and everything was fine. But his name was still struck from this parashah to show how powerful words are. How powerful words are, the words that we say to ourselves and the words that we say to others. Most of what I'm saying tonight, you don't have to take any notes. It's part of an emergency package that an organization I started called Heads Up has. You can go into schools and communities. We have workshops and we have handouts on how to speak to children, for teachers, for parents, and so on. If anyone needs that from a particular school, they can speak to me afterwards. So I'm going to tell you about the voices of the young people, then we're going to do a little bit about trauma and acute stress reaction, how to talk to children about death, 4 skills training that you'll get right now, and I'll tell you some about other workshops that I can do for you. The voices of the young people. I met with these people, and this is what they have to say to you.
Brain health and mental fitness is everywhere, disguised within
Innocence. Wrong.
enough is enough.
Face reality.
We need change.
Wake up.
End the stigma.
We need help.
Strong feelings, difficulties, and trauma are all parts of human experience.
Voices should be heard.
Time to act.
Anxiety is not a weakness.
I feel isolated.
Powerless.
I am the noise.
These children, these young people are not schizophrenic, they're not bipolar, and they're not suffering from severe depression. Some of them are doing very well at school. They're doing excellent academically. We must recognize that human condition has this kind of thing. One of my screens get off. Okay. All right. Trauma and acute stress reaction, it's very important that we understand this so that we understand what is pathological and what is not. When there's an acute, stressful event that occurs, okay, this can be what happened in the last few weeks. It can be terrorist attacks, it can be fires, it can be even burglaries in the middle of the night. That is a pretty traumatic attack, especially if your burglar is still in the room. So what actually happens is that there's a number of things that the body and mind does when it's under an acute attack. It thinks it's going to die, basically. And if there's one thing that the brain is designed to do, and only one thing, everything else is for this one thing, and that's to keep us alive. The brain's only interested in keeping us alive. Everything it does, and all the connections with, relationships with Kadosh Baruch Hu, spirituality, anything that we do is all about the end of the day what we do while we're alive. You can't do any of that when you're dead. So that's the number one function of the brain. So when it thinks it's going to die, it goes into all sorts of defense motions. And some of these motions are on the board just now. But when it comes to seeing our young people, our children that are going through acute stress, these are some of the things that might happen. They might have problems with their sleep, they might have changes in their mood, they might feel angry, they might withdraw into their room, they might be on their phones more, they might be on the internet more, they might be doing all sorts of different behaviors than they're normally doing. The message I want to get through to you right now is that this is not pathological. They are not ill. They're having a natural reaction. Okay, those thoughts that you had at the beginning when I started to talk, if you can multiply that by 1,000 and you've got all these kind of wasps and bees thoughts going around your head, the energy has to go somewhere. And so that's what they do. They do all humans, not just young people. Okay? So, what can we do about it? Well, we have to get back to routine. Okay, now, this is good for teachers. We get back to routine. We want to get them back in the class. But that doesn't mean that you can't be empathetic to your students in the class or to your children at home. And yes, they have to get up and go to school and do whatever needs to be done. But if there's any deadlines for exams the next morning or whatever, yes, it can be put off. Yes, you can have a discussion in class rather than just totally ignoring it. You have to be flexible. Okay, so another important thing to notice is that it's not pathological if it goes on for a number of days. Right? If this starts to carry on for a few weeks, then it's worthwhile taking note of. Okay, the NHS has something called watchful waiting, which means that after the first few days, which is perfectly normal, still going on, still having nightmares, still having anger, still having a lot of stuff going on, then you have to be careful, you have to watch, make sure that things not getting out of hand, and continue to be sympathetic and empathetic and have a listening ear and be open to them. But if it starts to go on after a month, then it's getting some sort of more chronic condition. But all I want to talk to you about is the first week. And if it happens in the first week,
There is no pathological problem. How do we talk to children about death? Something that we're not necessarily spoken to about, we're not taught. And it's very important because one of the things that we need to do is that we need to be very truthful, especially in this day and age of the information age. You tell a young child a story, and 5 minutes later he's told his friend that story that you told him. And his friend will say, well, wait a minute, that's not what I was told. Okay? At that moment, you've lost their trust. You've made them feel much more threatened than safe. Now, if I said that the brain is only interested in one thing, staying alive, that means being safe, then you just added to their stress. Okay, now, being truthful doesn't mean going into detail. Then you have to have age-appropriate truth, right? So then that Pesach, if anyone truth like that. So you have to know who you're talking to, right? And be appropriate to them. But being truthful is extremely important. Not to go into long-winded stories when you're talking to young people. It doesn't matter. Anyone under stress, because they can't take in all that information. Right? One thing that happens when our emotional brain hijacks our thinking brain is that we can't necessarily understand everything that's being said. Okay, we're not very good at problem solving, and this goes for adults too, and any other calculations that we need to make. So we have short, precise answers is the best. Listen very carefully. The young person in particular, you've got to understand young people in general, and I'm talking about adolescents, they're going through biological, neurological, and psychological changes, right? Biological, we know about all the hormones and the whole thing, and we're talking about regular young adolescents. Okay, but we've got to understand that their brain is being pruned. It's like a garden that's being pruned of millions and millions of neurons. So you can imagine, there's some stuff going on up there, right? Apart from the psychological changes that are going on in the family, trying to create independence from the self and separation from the parents. You have to listen very carefully. And you might not necessarily understand everything that is going on. But the important thing is that you give them a listening ear. Discuss with them. Don't be afraid to discuss with them. Have a discussion with them. Ask them questions. And if you don't know the answer, I mean, you've got to understand that children expect us to be all powerful. But it's important that they understand that we're not. So it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know, and I'll try and find out for you. When I know, I'll come back. That's also okay. Ask what they need and what they want is very important. And the most important, and this is for teachers and this is for parents or any carers, to make sure that they get the message that you are available for them. Right, we're going into 4 skills, which means that you have to work and not just listen. And the number 1 skill is about, you can understand for skills that to do with nephesh, to do with the psyche. Okay, psyche works in a lot of symbolism. It's not about lectures, and it's not about, academics. So sometimes, and I get this when I'm being taught it, sometimes it gets a little bit hairy-fairy, right? Hippy-dippy stuff. And I'm not quite sure, is this actually having an effect or not having an effect? So what I'm going to talk to you about are scientifically evidence-based techniques. And the first one, which is the most important one in my mind, is to do directly with the vagus nerve. Very, very important cranial nerve. It's the number 10 cranial nerve. Comes out of the brain, goes into the body. Very interesting thing about this nerve, apart from being the longest nerve, and there's more than one of them, but apart from being the longest nerve in the body, in the nervous system, a nerve is like an electronic, so it goes from A to B. So this nerve goes from A to B to C to E, and a number of places. And particular places that are connected with safety or danger. So it goes to the throat, goes to the heart, goes to the lungs, goes to the gut. But we have a brain in our gut. People have gut feelings. Now we know that there actually is a brain in the gut that has gut feelings, and separated from the brain in the head. This nerve, you can actually turn down the emergency system that goes off when you're in acute stress. In acute stress, the whole emergency system goes into function. Fight or flight, if anyone's heard of it, And if you've got nowhere to go, and we don't have anywhere to go, we're sitting at home, that energy has to come out somewhere, and that comes out in people's moods and behaviors. But if you want to turn that off, or at least have a possibility of turning it off, this is what you do, okay? So we're all going to do it together, and it's a breathing exercise. The breathing exercise, we're using your stomach, and top is out, then like this. Okay? You want to lie on the floor and put a book on it, you can practice using that muscle because we don't use it much. Okay, so it comes out when we're breathing in, and in when we're breathing out. We're going to breathe in through our nose, and we're going to breathe out through our mouths. Okay, there's a whole Kabbalistic thought on that, but I'm going to go into that. Okay, so we're going to hold it in our lungs for 2 seconds and out for 5. So in for 3, I'm going to lift my hand at this. 1, 2, 3. We breathe in through your nose, big deep breath. Hold it for 2 seconds and out for 5. And when you're blowing out, I want you to blow out as if you're blowing bubbles. You know that thing you used to blow bubbles? So you make a little constriction in your mouth and you make a noise. That back pressure is going to be connecting to that nerve. Okay? If you want to know more about it, you can read A Healthy Heart Is Not Metronome, and you can read more about these now. All right, so everybody breathing in through the nose. In, 2, 3. Hold, 2, out through the mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once again, in through the nose. Hold, and out through the mouth. 2 times more. In. Hold, and out. Last time. In. Hold, and out. Just marinate a little bit in that oxygen, and you might feel it. Okay, 2, 3 more quick ones. These are called somatic. When we're feeling in shock, we lose the sense of our body. So we put our right hand under our left armpit, our left hand on our shoulder, and just hold it. Okay, and you can hold it there for a few minutes. All right. That's the second one. The third one is sit in a comfortable place. You're going to use your senses, because the only time you can use your senses is right now. You can't use them a minute ago or in 2 minutes. It brings you right into your body and right into the present moment. Just look around the room and pick out 4 things that you can see and name them. So I can see the light, screen, chair, and sheet. Okay? Pick out 3 things that you can hear: projector, people talking, footsteps. 2 things that I can feel: microphone and my shoes. You do that slower, it brings your mind right out of your head and into your body. Okay, and the final one, and with that I'll close, is that we put one hand on our head, on our forehead, and the second hand on our, like our heart. Okay, and you keep it there for a few minutes. And then you take the forehead one off and put it on the tummy, put the other one there, and do that for a few minutes. These 4 exercises will pull you out of that acute stress, hysterical situation, and into much more controlled situation. Okay, so just let me move through that a minute. Okay, and I'll leave you that until the end.
Brain health and mental fitness is everywhere, the skies within.
Innocence. Rot.
Enough is enough.
Face reality.
We need change.
Wake up.
End stigma.
We need help.
Strong feelings, difficulties, and trauma are all parts of human experience.
Voices should be heard.
Time to act.
Anxiety is not a weakness.
I feel isolated.
Powerless.
I am enough.
Perhaps we are collecting questions or collating the questions for the Q&A session. I'm going to call on Rabbi Daniel Walker to share a few thoughts about ways that we as a community of individuals can help each other. Rabbi Walker.
הנה מהטוב ומהנוי שצריכים גם יחד. How good and how pleasant it is when brethren come together in unity. Tonight we have taken a giant step forward in improving the mental health of our community. Not least because we've heard many useful and interesting and helpful tools that we can use to improve mental health. We know that ultimately perhaps what we most need is Hashem's blessing and divine blessing to give us success in all of our efforts. And there is no climatic bracha, there is no vessel that holds blessing, Allah Hashalom except peace. But I think we've done something much more. I think we've taken a huge step into becoming the kind of community that promotes good mental health. A community that has unity and togetherness. That kind of community provides support and comfort. Other communities, the kind of community that offers rejection, only give pain and suffering. I think the question is how we treat the other. We all have our own roles. We all have our own beliefs. We all have our own ideals. And how do we treat people who don't share them? How do we treat people who choose different paths? Perhaps most importantly, what do we do when our own young people don't live up to the expectations that we aspire for them? What happens when a young person is less than successful in whatever goal we set for them? We're widespread in the community here. Everyone in this community has that problem. Everyone struggles to deal when young people don't live up to our expectations. And we have a challenge. Do we greet that young person? Do we greet the person who is different with acceptance, with welcome? Or do we instead give them exclusion and rejection? The answer to that question is the answer whether or not we will have a community that promotes and supports good mental health. Today we are coming together. We lit a small candle. A little bit of light drives away a lot of darkness. But only as long as we take that candle and we keep it burning. We're going to go back to our lives very soon. I ask, I beg, demand, that as you leave, you offer the smile of acceptance, the hand of assistance and affection to someone to whom you don't normally speak, someone who's not on your radar, someone you don't agree with, someone who isn't like you. And perhaps more importantly, you go home and you tell your children the same thing. You tell them to be kind, to be accepting. You tell them to be kind to the child in the class who's different, who's weak, who's struggling, who's weird. As a mental health professional, I'll use words like tolerance and acceptance. But I'm going to use the terrorist language instead, something which is much stronger. The terror doesn't demand tolerance and acceptance. The terror demands ahava, love. Ahavas Yisrael, love, what's followed you. Love, with all of the intense emotions that go along with that. Love that means not to judge, and yes, to accept and to tolerate, but to truly care about another Jew, another member of the community, however different they are. I have a vision. The Mishnah Rosh Hashanah says that when the Sanhedrin wanted to announce the new moon, Rosh Chodesh, they would light beacons. They would take a candle, they would light a torch, they would light a beacon. And then the next mountain, they'd see the beacon and they'd light another one. And so on and so on and so on. Until a chain of beacons burned across the land of Israel. And there was one person standing on the border, facing the exile, facing Babylonia. And they would stand on the mountain and they would wave their torch in the air. And they would keep waving that torch until all of the exiles was one big sea of flame. Let's take that candle, that torch of kindness and love, and keep waving it, and keep passing it on, until all of this dark world is full of light. Full of the light of Ahavas Yisrael, of love, of care, until all of the evil and the darkness of rejection and exclusion is banished forever. If we resolve to do so, we will surely merit the fulfillment of the verse, Ki ani Hashem Lechacha, I am Hashem who heals you. And no one will suffer any physical, or mental, and health, because together we'll go to greet Mashiach, Hevel Meinu. Amen.
MP Ivan Lewis has shared his story before about his own mental health challenges. And he's not going to do so again tonight, but he has been very involved in helping to organise this event. Before we start the question and answer session, which we're still frantically collating, there's a lot of questions to collate. John is working very hard on that there. Ivan's going to say a few words about where we go from here.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you for all you've done to make this evening possible. Friends, tonight you have turned up here in unprecedented numbers to send the strongest possible message. The mental well-being of our young people must now be a priority for our community. Action for Mental Health is not a one-off event, a slick slogan, or a knee-jerk reaction. It is our commitment to deliver real and lasting change. As parents, grandparents, educators, health professionals, and concerned adults, we know that young people face many challenges. Some eternal, such as exam pressures and the availability of drugs. Others, social media and new technology, a blessing and a curse sent to test this generation. As you've all heard, our young people need the basic skills to be resilient, to stay safe and healthy. Others, from the most gifted and the most religious, to the alienated and the marginalised, will need more intense and sustained support. Jewish continuity has always been about education, education, education. But young people who are bullied, struggle to form friendships, or face sometimes hidden challenges at home, frequently struggle and in some cases suffer. Far from education and home strengthening their Jewish identity, it causes them to look elsewhere for support, friendship and well-being. That isn't good enough for our community. Parents are uneasy about the dominance of smartphones, Facebook and Instagram, but feel disempowered to impose limits and in busy lives sometimes struggle to organise positive alternatives. Some prohibit the use of smartphones, but we all know this doesn't mean that young people don't find other ways to access the internet. Of course, I welcome the fact that the government are committed to greater regulation in areas where social media is putting young people's health and lives at risk. But this alone will not be enough. Most adults at home and at school are trying to do their best for our young people. But teachers and parents need support and must be open to specialist input which respects religious beliefs and the ethos of specific institutions, but also has the expertise and trust to engage effectively with young people. Of course, some young people will feel able to confide in parents and teachers, but others will need access to alternative sources of support if they are to share their true concerns. This may be expert professionals, or it may be trained mentors. Friends, recent events have shocked our community to the core. But out of tragedy and pain has come a new alliance of organisations and individuals determined to make a difference. Egos, organisational preciousness, and religious differences put to one side in pursuit of a greater cause, the well-being of our young people. We are absolutely determined to pool our expertise and resources to ensure that young people, their families and our schools have access to a comprehensive range of support. We will need to raise funds to support a range of projects as part of a coherent community-wide strategy. But we respectfully ask organisations and donors to resist the temptation to do their own thing, and instead, please, join this unprecedented community-wide effort. We say to leaders, it is not a sign of weakness to let others into your organisations who can provide the expertise that you frankly cannot be expected to have. The Jewish community of Manchester should be proud of itself. We have some of the best schools and social welfare organisations, not just in the Jewish community, but in this nation. We also have many exceptional individuals who care for loved ones and volunteer to support people in need. Tonight, let us pledge to create the same excellence in the way that we support our young people. By investing in their well-being, we invest in our future and we invest in our continuity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There'll now be a question and answer session. We've been inundated with questions. We're not going to be able to answer all of them, but we're going to do our best. We're going to invite all the speakers back up here, take a seat, together with Dr. Robert Block. Dr. Robert Block, bring your chairs behind. Consultant paediatrician for Tameside, Glossop NHS Trust, and Willie Garner, who is Director of Community Services at the Fed. Before I hand over to our session chair, Johnny Weinberg, I must remind you that we can't take any questions or comments from the floor. This is so that we can manage what could be an emotional and sensitive session as best as we can. I appreciate your understanding in this matter. Thank you. Okay, just to give you some idea of timing, this evening we'll finish by 10 p.m. So we will try and get through as many questions as we can. Then I'm going to wrap up. Then the stands will be open later and the refreshments.
I'm going to try without the microphone because I tend to have a big voice. Can you hear me at the back? Great, thank you, Rob. Okay, so microphone to the panel. We're going to go through you. You're up first, Andy. 3 questions up there. Is there a danger bias if someone has a suicide plan, will they encourage them to formulate a plan that's pipeline and help them take the next step? Can you stop a person who intends to commit suicide? And if people really wanting to commit suicide, why would they be honest and admit it to anyone?
Okay, very good questions, thank you for those. Going to start with the last two. Tonight is about minimising risk. We cannot eliminate risk. We have to be very clear about that. And it is true that we might not be able to eliminate totally risk. There are definitely some people who will not tell anybody. And as I say, we cannot completely eliminate risk. In terms of the danger of mentioning it, this is why a lot of people are afraid to talk about suicide with young people. There is no evidence that asking people about it is going to give them ideas. Asking people about self-harm gives them ideas. Believe me, they know this stuff. They know this stuff. It's not like if you don't mention it, the thought won't cross their mind. So really, we should be aware that we should be talking about it. We're not going to give them ideas, but we have to accept that we cannot eliminate all risk. That's how it is, unfortunately. That's succinct enough.
Thank you. We're going to try and keep it as succinct as possible. We do have more questions we're going to be able to get through. What we're going to try and do is set up a web page, make sure that you all get access to that and put answers to questions on there. Whizzing along, Dr. Robert Block, how do you get a teenager to go and speak to and ask for professional help?
Okay, unlike most of the people on the panel here, I'm not first and foremost a mental health professional, I'm a paediatrician, but often I will see young people and their parents who are role as on the ward in A&E when they're first presenting, often in acute distress, and often they want help, they're looking for help. As we mentioned, deliberate self-harm, overdose is often a sign of psychological distress, emotional distress, and often a call for help. Very, very few of the children with 40 years of practice who've come in with an overdose are actually really suicidal. They're seeking help, they're seeking the support that they need. They often have no, I'm going to wind this up slightly if I may, they often have no idea of the effects that tablets will have on them. They think if they are going to end their lives, it'll be like they see on film or TV, they'll fall asleep. The vast, vast majority of tablets out there, medications and overdose that are lethal, it is not a pleasant way to go. And I make it very clear to the young people who I see on the wards that they're old enough to take an overdose, they're old enough to know what it is they've taken, the effect it has on them. The best way to get a teenager to go and seek help is to actually listen to them. Ask what's wrong. Say you want to listen to them, that what they're telling you is confidential. And know that the help that is out there, that there are people who want to help them, and they're not the only person going through exactly the same thing that they're going through. And I may take this opportunity. There's been a lot of talk about young people. Mental health issues is something that come up on anyone regardless of age, whether they're 5 or 6 years old or they're 90 years old. And we're doing a huge disservice if we keep talking about young people all the time. I understand why it's being said and why there's this focus on young people because of recent events, but we must remember that there are lots of people of all ages, who are all walks of life, with all professions, who are going through acute or chronic mental health, often unrecognised. Some going back to childhood, often a lot not, and we must want to include them in all this discussion.
Next question is regarding cutting. If a child stops cutting themselves, it's a sign they're in pain. What can we do to help our children before they start doing that? And this person thinks that before, it's much harder to help them once they start cutting.
This is quite a long question. The best thing we can do is, when we think about this, is prevention, really. And prevention is, like I said before, about healthy relationships. If we're listening to them, if we're offering them support on the general level, that's the best way of dealing with that. And also, I always say this many times, is that we've got to know our children. Because if they're in pain, then they're not usually starting cutting straight away. So it might be a process that they go through. So It's really important that we know our children, and we can talk to our children, and if they are in pain, we get them the help before hopefully they start self-harming.
Thank you. And James, there aren't any always obvious signs of symptom mental health issues, and sufferers in crisis can put on a good mask. What advice can you give families in this situation when they find out an illness can be more advanced? I'm sorry.
Okay, I think I understand that one. All right. So I guess that this is advice for families if they think the illness is more. Okay. So if you're ever not sure where you want to go for support, lots of different ways you can. So if it's a young person, they can go to Childlines, adults who's unwell, they can go to Samaritans. If it's someone you're worried about, speak to the GP. You can speak to community mental health teams. There are lots of charities, other mental health charities that you can speak to. As people said already, speaking to the child themselves is always useful. And saying to them, as has already been said, I'm not going to tell you unless I absolutely have to. Never give absolute confidentiality because you never want to be in that situation when you breach your trust. Is that right?
As I said, we're going to try and get more comprehensive answers to you afterwards, but thanks so much. And whizzing along, there's a couple of questions here for Dr. Avalos. There's always going to be people who are employed in financial difficulties. How are the children in those families supposed to gain resilience? And also, if they see arguments about that, how can we protect them? And the second question for a child who doesn't sleep well, at what stage is intervention needed?
So working in the NHS, a lot of the difficulties that we see in young people are in families that are indeed facing financial difficulties. Parents might be going through, as I mentioned, difficult situations. And it's a really tricky question because essentially as a practitioner, what you have to do is you have to try and look at the whole system, you have to try and engage other agencies who may be able to assist the family. You may need to help the parents to navigate some of their conflicts as best as possible. And gaining resilience in that way, you might need to kind of more focus on, whilst the domestic violence might be going on, which would need to be kind of looked at and referred, kind of damage limitation. Often when I'm doing work and there's a lot of this going on, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to work with the young person while all this is going on in the background, because essentially this is what may be the underlying cause. So you can't kind of indirectly solve that underlying cause through the child. That just doesn't make sense. So really the answer is it's a much wider and holistic problem that needs to be addressed. Children not sleeping well, I think this is where the impact of their lack of sleep is clear in their everyday life, so that you're seeing as a result of their lack of sleep, they are not able to function in the way that they used to be able to. So they may not be able to get up for school over a long period. They may be irritable, particularly irritable. They may be coming into the parent's bedroom and disturbing the rest of the family. And sleep is really, really important for, as I said, all of our psychological functioning. So it's really good to get in early as well, because there can be really bad habits that can be learned by, particularly by younger children, in terms of going to parents' rooms and so on. So nipping sleep problems in the bud is really, really important.
Thanks ever so much. And moving on to a couple of other questions about school. How do we manage the stresses when there are high expectations of our children? And when a child is suffering from mental illness, we rely on them to take time off school? Bernie?
Just before I answer this question, I just want to go back. If you do have a child that you find marks that they are putting themselves, I think one of the things as a parent that you have a duty to do is speak to your GP, make sure that they're well, make sure that they're getting the wounds cleaned, and make sure you have an opportunity to enable another professional to see what's going on with your child on their arms or whatever. So onto the school. I'm not an academic, I work at the Fed, but I think the relationship between you as parents and the school is paramount. So I know that we've got very good schools in our area that have wellbeing or pastoral leads, and when your child might have an additional mental health need, you need to identify that with the school. Is that, the confidentiality of what the child's needs are will be maintained by that school, but they need to know what's going on in that child's life. I think that anyone who's unwell and being unwell in mental health issues are a sign and symptom of being unwell. So if that child does need time away from school, they need to take that. And you as a parent need to liaise with the school to allow them time to be able to catch up with their work if they're away out of the classroom, but you need to allow them time to recover and to get well. So I think the relationship between you and your child's school is absolutely paramount. And what we hope is that schools in our area are listening to parents and will enable you to have a good dialogue about what your child needs at that time when they're in work.
You might as well keep the microphone, Sandy. Another question about school in terms of an issue somebody had with the Seneco, and what should schools do to provide emotional support for children?
Okay, I think the schools issue is really, really important, and I know I've had a lot of conversations with people about school. We've been working with some of the schools, and a lot of the schools do have a lot of programs in place. Schools do have very limited resources, and there are some schools, obviously, that are going to have better provision than others. This is something that is really, really important, and as Ivan was saying, in terms of strategy, we need to work with the schools, however good their provision is, and some of the schools provide an excellent provision and have provided excellent provision, and hopefully will continue to, but obviously it's not always going to be perfect across the whole sector. We really do need to work with the schools, and that works both ways, because if the schools have an excellent programme, let's hear about it, let's share it. Maybe there's other people in the community that can benefit from that too. And likewise, if we have resources, let's share those. So these questions really come down to moving forward and working with the schools, and we're hoping that we're going to build up programmes with the schools, with the youth movement, for all our young people, so that we're all working together so that these gaps are filled.
Okay, 2 questions for Deborah Fraser. Are funds available for people who can't afford regular therapy in the private sector? And counter that, with NHS funds back, we'll be directing people to private therapists.
Okay, so the funds being available, my understanding is that there may well be, but it's not an area with which I have a huge amount of expertise. So there are people that do provide funding for private therapists, but I work within the NHS, and no funds are actually necessary within the NHS. That's free at the point of need, as we've heard very often. So, as I say, there are some facility, but there's certainly not as much as there was in the past. But with the NHS funds being stretched, the question is, should there be a greater emphasis on encouraging people to bypass the NHS? Now, my thoughts on that are that we shouldn't be bypassing the NHS unless it's not severe enough. Because when we come down to severe mental health problems, the NHS do have the facility to cover the spectrum from beginning through to the end. As funds have been tight, what has suffered, should we say, is probably the less serious end of the scale rather than the more serious end of the scale. But if we have something that is a severe and enduring mental health problem, the NHS is most definitely the best place to be.
Okay, and the next question is for Sandy. It's about moving forward, making sure that young people can benefit from all the resources. How do we do that? Will there be a protocol for sharing information between ages? Will there be a multi-agency plan?
So this is what the Action for Mental Health Strategy Group that we've set up is planning to do. It's exactly what we're planning to do. And moving forward, we want this to be a one-stop shop that all the agencies that are already providing mental health services, whether statutory or charitable or whatever, are all involved in that, or we're coordinating. We have most of those organisations already on board. So we want that to be that one-stop place that people can go to get the resources that they need. I'll mention that briefly when I do my closing comments later. And also in relation to all of this and to the question to Deborah, my vision, my dream is that anybody in this community who needs access to mental health support will be able to get it one way or another. That's my dream. It's going to take a long time to fulfil, but please help us get there.
Questions, and like I say, we'll get to the rest of them online, or people can speak to people afterwards. Deborah, again, if you think your child is having an acute mental health episode, how to get urgent help, what's the process? Would you go to A&E?
Yes, A&E is the best place. It will be the beginning of getting into services, and will make it the smoothest and most efficient way if you go through A&E. The process really ought to begin with the GP, but in an acute episode, which is what the question is asking, the answer is yes, go to A&E. Yeah.
Sorry, just as one to put that in more concrete terms, I do an A&E session every Monday afternoon, and typically Monday afternoon, evening, and Friday afternoon, evening, the two busiest times in A&E. And the general rule of thumb is, if you think your child is enough to go to A&E with a physical or mental, you take them. And for a child if your child has written a suicide note, you discover they're cutting and you're worried, they've taken an overdose, you just bring them, let the medical professionals and the psychological professionals make the decision whether that child needs to be admitted, kept an overnight, and have further assessments urgently, or can be done on an outpatient basis. Don't, as parents, don't take it on as yourself.
Next question is, do mental health issues happen frequently in religious communities? I'm not sure who can actually answer that. I think the point is, does it matter if they're happening? We need to address them anyway. It's not by law, the next question, well,
yes, of course.
Qualified overview for religious signals on mental health issues while trying to date or marry.
Honesty, definitely. It's an interesting question, at which point does one disclose mental health issues in the process of dating and towards marriage? But whichever stage it happens, the person has to be honest. As rabbis, we hear many terrible stories of people who haven't been honest about any kind of condition, physical or mental, they have. It's a breach of trust in a marriage before marriage even started, and it has terrible consequences. So first of all, say most definitely be honest, but also that it doesn't mean that a person can't find a spouse. I think, again, perhaps the questions are far better qualified to even say it, but unequivocally, it doesn't mean that a person can't find a spouse. With the right treatment, with the right help, with the right support, it's definitely possible, but please do be honest.
I just thank everybody. I think Sandy's going to summate now. Carry on, you wonderful job.
An event like this would normally take 6 months to plan. We had 2 weeks. And whilst the support of almost the entire community has been overwhelming, the challenge at times has also felt overwhelming. One thing has kept me going and motivated me to persevere this evening. When I first conceived of this idea, just over 2 weeks ago, I was invited to speak to a small group of young people in our community. I told them of my plan for this event, and they said to me, one after the other, "It won't work, Sandy. No one will come. The community won't support it. No one cares about mental health. Nothing will change. This community does not care about mental health." And now as I look around, and I see so many of you here tonight, giving up your Saturday nights and other plans. And I've seen a huge list of organisations, charities, schools and schools backing this event. And I remember the phone calls and texts I received when the advert for this event went live. And organisations were begging me to add their names to show their support, complaining that they weren't listed, telling me over and over, we care, we care. And when I think of the many people contacting us to offer their help tonight, the organisations who have helped fund various parts of it, and the huge team from across the community of Rabbonin, community workers, parents, and mental health practitioners that have helped pull this together so quickly. And they haven't done this for me, I'm under no illusions. They've done all this, and we are all here because we care. When I look at all this, and I look around tonight and see what's been achieved, I feel that my initial goal has been met, and that I can go back to those young people and tell them that they are wrong. I can go back and tell them that when it comes to mental health, this community cares. And we must pledge tonight that we will care not just tonight when it's all fresh in our minds, but that we will continue to care next week, next month, next year, and going forward. Tonight is not about providing all the answers. It's just the start. And the Action for Mental Health Strategy Group we have built has at least 3 initiatives planned in the immediate future. This event tonight was originally planned as a 2-strand programme with a parallel one for young people. However, once we were advised that schools have been providing their own support and events for their pupils, we felt it was not appropriate for us to add to that or potentially interfere at this time. We hope to provide another event specifically for young people soon and hope to work with the schools and youth movements over this. We're also planning an afternoon of stalls and smaller workshops later on, including special workshops about drugs. And my immediate priority is to create a website as soon as possible that will provide that one-stop shop I've just been talking about on what provision and support is out there, what to do, where to go, how to get help. There is so much out there already from fantastic organisations like Nashona, the Fed, Chabad Community Care, Keren, the Gateway, with statutory organisations, but people don't always know about it. Events, workshops and initiatives that they put on can also be promoted on this site so that in future, whenever anyone, young or older, has a mental health issue, they can find the right resources in one place at their fingertips. Obviously, to do that, we need the support and cooperation of all the organisations involved, most of whom are already on the Action for Mental Health Strategy Group. If you're one of those organisations and you're not already on the group, we invite you to join us. These initiatives will obviously need funding. There is no appeal tonight, but if anyone is moved to donate, we will of course gratefully accept. I'm indebted to everyone who has helped put together this event. And I will repeat what I've written in the programme on your seat. Please read it, because these are incredible people. The team that has become the Action for Mental Health Strategy Group is formidable and made up of representatives from many cross-communal organisations in Manchester, as well as mental health professionals. And as I keep saying, tonight is just the start of our work. Young Jewish people of Manchester, I want to end this evening with one message to you from tonight. One take-home message that I want to send directly to you from this event. When it comes to mental health in this community, we care.
And your feedback forms in at the back. Thank you so much.
Yeah.